when Canada went to war in 1914. She equipped her fledgling army with what was essentially a brand new rifle. This rifle, the Mark III Ross, was only issued generally for the first time to the hodgepodge of troops then assembling at Valcartier, Quebec. They were struggling to organize as the 1st Canadian Division, and would take this rifle as they moved to England and then to France. Once there, its already lamentable reputation would become solidified, for it was marred with numerous and hugely significant quality control issues, and in units of the 1st Division, it would be replaced unofficially as early as April 1915. It would take another year before this decision was fully ratified, and the Ross was withdrawn from frontline CEF units by mid-1916. Its reputation, however, was somewhat nuanced, and there were many fixes and modifications made to the rifle in order to make it perform to expectations. But it was a case of too little, too late, and the rifle Mark III Ross was consigned with its reputation to history. The rifle that replaced the Ross was, of course, the venerable SMLE. By this point, battle-proven and holding the confidence of its users, Canada would use this rifle until 1943, when it was replaced by the number 4. Now, these two rifles obviously hold different places in history, but they were intended to be used the same way and perform the same duties. They did, however, have different characteristics in mechanism, sights, and balance. Here, I'll explore some of these differences and see whether or not they had any meaningful impact on the rifle's usage. In this video, continuing the firepower series, we'll compare the practical rates of fire of these two well-known Great War rifles, although one of them might be better known for its infamy than the other. The Ross rifle, or perhaps more specifically the Ross Mark III, holds an important place in military, especially Canadian, military history. Born out of necessity but raised and nurtured with misdirected steps, the end result was a highly imperfect rifle that had significant flaws. Now, most of these were in quality or design and manufacture, and not the subject of this video. Nonetheless, it would be these aspects that would plague its users, the men of the CEF in the early part of the Great War, to the point of willful yet wholly unofficial abandonment of the rifle in varying capacities as the war progressed. While metallurgy was the chief culprit and caused the lion's share of the issues, the rifle also had other features more inherent to the overall design, such as its shape, weight, and the engineering of its mechanism, that also required overcoming. We cannot, or will not, as the case may be, duplicate these issues both in metallurgy or in the conditions of service that led to all the troubles. I'm going to leave mud tests to in-range TV. The quality issues were eventually fixed, and any effect of extreme amounts of mud and other fouling were not perhaps as specific to the Ross as we might like to think. After all, those kinds of horrible conditions would affect any rifle in a similar way. What we can evaluate here are its handling characteristics, the ergonomic features, or lack of them, and any inherent design features of a normal, well-running rifle. The SMLE was of course the contemporary rifle, and it would of course replace the Ross in the CEF and the Army at large. Much has been published here on the channel regarding it, its features, capabilities, as well as the musketry of the era, so we won't dwell on it here. It does, however, provide the only appropriate rifle to compare the Ross to, as it was the only suitable alternative when the Ross was officially replaced in 1916. The intent is not only to test the rapid firing of these rifles, but also other handling characteristics as well. That way, a better, more enlightened comparison of them regarding their length and other battlefield-specific characteristics may occur. The ammunition used was a mixture of my usual cast loads for the SMLE and some surplus Greek Mark VII for the Ross. This was provided by friend of the channel, Mike. Both of these were of course placed in the ubiquitous 5-round chargers. I must place a small caveat here in regards to the cast loads used in the SMLE. The brass has been used quite significantly, and as a result, the shoulders have seemingly expanded to a slight degree. This often causes chambering issues that would not necessarily be present with brand new or service ammunition. Eventually, I will take measures to return the brass to a closer form of its original, thereby alleviating these chambering issues. But when you see things becoming sticky here in this video and elsewhere on the channel, you'll understand that it's not a function of the rifle, but rather the ammunition that I've made for it. The target used in this video might be recognizable to viewers of the channel. It's a standard figure 2 of Great War vintage, as seen in many other videos here. Historically accurate, it forms a good, even playing field for the comparison of the arms in question. The practices shot here follow the standard application as used in other videos in the Firepower series. A given number of rounds fired in the appropriate fire position, done at 100 yards, into the figure 2. As far as the number of rounds go, I settled on the standard benchmark of 15 rounds. This was the amount allotted for the famous practice 22 of the 1914 musketry regulation, and of course they will be shot in a rapid, though historical way. In this first practice, I elected to shoot it by the book, so to speak, loading and shooting 5 at a time. Please ignore the outcome of a sweaty hand and an oily bolt here. While that did sting a bit, as my thumb actually went right into my eye, the practice went along quite well. Charging the magazine was smooth enough both times, and the seemingly ubiquitous yet somewhat random sticky case in the chamber was overcome a couple of times without much effort. As you can see here, loading was done from the pouch. This was according both to regulations and applied equally as well to any use in action. I managed to get the 15 rounds away in 44 seconds, even with the sticky cases and the thumb in the eye.
So, 15 rounds rapid with the SMLE, loading 5 at a time. Looks like I pulled one here and one here, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 makes 15 hits on target with a general reasonable grouping right in the center of mass.
Maybe the flyers had something to do with the sticky case, or maybe not. By way of utilizing a somewhat more realistic example of the weapon in action, I shot the same practice again, only this time I started with 10 rounds in the magazine, reloading with 5 rounds, once only. As you can see, the sticky case problem is somewhat random, but nearly always present to some degree. I must have been suffering from the heat of the day or something here, because somehow I was unable to count my rounds. With the aggravating addition of the sticky cases, it certainly wasn't my best effort, but I was able to work through that and turned in a decent result of 39 seconds.
So that was 15 rounds with 10 rounds in the magazine and a 5-round reload. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So, still all 15 hits. Maybe it's a little bit more spread out. I was perhaps rushing a little bit more than I was last time, but anyway, 15 good hits.
The grouping wasn't anything to write home about, but it is rapid shooting after all, and there were 15 hits on target. There would only be one Ross practice, due to its 5-round magazine. I have found in the past that charging that magazine can be somewhat hit and miss. Pardon the pun. During this practice, the first reload seemed to go smoothly enough. For those of you who have never fired the Ross, the action is very smooth, but requires the bolt to be worked deliberately with good, positive technique. The throw of the bolt is substantially longer than that of the SMLE, and the extra movement required is noticeable. The second reload was a bit subpar, as you can see here. More on that in a bit. One thing that is very noticeable is the great set of sights the Ross has. The combination of aperture and the shrouded front sight make aiming quite effortless, with the shroud fitting perfectly inside the aperture. With the few extra seconds taken for the reloads, the Ross turned in a time of 55 seconds.
So there's the Ross. 15 rounds rapid, obviously with a 5-round magazine, only 5 at a time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. All right, center mass.
All in all, not too bad for a rapid shoot. So, with the shooting done, let's have a look at the data. As might be expected, beginning with 10 rounds in the magazine gave the SMLE the edge, turning in a best time of 39 seconds. By introducing the second reload in the 5 at a time practice, the SMLE was 13% slower at 44 seconds. The 55-second time turned in by the Ross was predominantly due to the magazine charging issues. This made the Ross 41% slower than the SMLE, starting with 10 rounds, and noticeably 25% slower than the SMLE using the same loading scheme. As far as the groupings went, there really wasn't much to choose between the three practices, although it could be argued the Ross had a slight advantage there. Perhaps a closer examination of the Ross's charging issues. It must be said that the magazine design and characteristics are a bit complex. Specific details are covered in the Ross introduction video elsewhere on the channel, but suffice it to say, I have not had the best of luck performing this evolution. Perhaps it's the height above the platform that the guide holds the charger, or simply the unsteadiness of the whole thing, that often causes the rounds to almost fall out of the charger and get fouled with each other. I've tried doing it fast and slow, and with different thumb placements, with no better results either way. The sights are a definite strong suit to the rifle. They are complex, with no fewer than 3, shall we call them, apertures, 2 of which are battle sights, and are in effect apertures with the top third cut out, and 2 scales with which to adjust them, one for range, and the other a vernier scale. Despite this complexity, they are simple to use and effective in performing their task, they being not really much different than the series of ladder sights found on the number 4 rifle, some 30 years later. To be honest, I don't know for sure if the loading ergonomics of my Ross are indicative of all Mark III Rosses. Some viewers have commented that they too have had similar issues with theirs. I have no reason to believe that my rifle is deficient in any way, as it is serviceable and correct. Suffice it to say that it would seem that any finickiness in loading would simply be part of the aggregate of issues experienced by the men of the CEF in the early years of the Great War. In the next part of the series, we'll explore some of the handling characteristics of the Ross and continue the comparison with the SMLE. If you'd like to support the channel, please stop by our Patreon page. The link is in the description below. And for more information on projects and updates between videos, follow us on our Facebook page.